All right. Welcome everybody for one of the last, I guess the last panel of the day. Obviously we do not have the biggest group because it's the end of the show, so we will try to keep this freewheeling and don't hesitate to ask questions even during the discussion. We don't have to leave it to the very end. Try to keep it flowing pretty rapidly. We have some really good perspectives here. The name of the topic, of course, is New Opportunities to Monetize Premium Video. And that means discussing the YouTube economy, the different stakeholders within it. There's been a lot of action and activity in the space, as some of you I'm sure have followed, like in the MCN world that will be defined. In the last couple months, it's been just a rolling amount of activity with one of the biggest deals that's been announced is Disney's acquisition of Maker Studios for $500 million up to $950 million. So we'll get into that world a little bit. Business models, so people understand how money can be made or not in the premium online video world, and then just different perspectives in terms of long-term winners and losers. So as I do in all my panels, I try to get a nice mix of different players or stakeholders within the ecosystem. So we have OTT service providers, MCNs, music-focused OTT, MTV, and then we have representative of manager of talent, and getting into some of the brands and how they use premium content. So with that, I'll get into some bios, and then we'll move forward. So Frank Bistero, right there, Vice President and Head of BD for Video at AOL. As Head of BD and Partnerships, Frank leads all business development efforts for video across the AOL ON network, which includes all originals, which is another theme that's been going on significantly in the premium online video space. He brings over 8 years of online video experience from senior sales and BD positions at several pioneers enabling premium high-quality video online. That's Maven Networks, which was acquired by Yahoo, The Feed Room, and Kaltura. So very big names that many of you are familiar with. Then Miguel Rojas. Miguel is Director of Content Production and Technology Development at MTV. He began his career in video production with MTV and Condé Nast, and later joined LXTV, a startup web video lifestyle network where he served as the manager of digital operations and distribution. And that company was later acquired by NBC Universal. In 2012, he returned to Viacom as the Director of Content Production and Technology, and he helps work on rolling out emerging workflows and digital initiatives for the music group. And one other fun fact, Miguel is a recipient of a New York Emmy Award. Congratulations. Mike Wan is the Chief Revenue Officer of a company you may have been hearing about quite a bit in the press recently, leading MCN Fullscreen. For more than a decade, Mike has facilitated large-scale BD initiatives focused on reaching new market segments and growing new products. Mike most recently served as Chief Revenue Officer at Spin Media, a leading music and pop culture network that drove 350 million page views per month, and he spent 6 years at Demand Media, where he oversaw strategic partnerships. And then finally, Will Griggs just graciously agreed to pinch hit on this panel, and he's the co-founder of Cantora, which is a really interesting company, launched in 2005 after they discovered MGMT, a great band. And among other things, Cantora has grown into a cutting-edge music company incorporating tech investment, so a very different kind of animal, a record label, and then immersive live experiences. And video, of course, is a significant part of that, so that will be an interesting perspective. He represents hot indie bands like Bare Hands, continuing today. By leveraging their unique position within traditional music and startup worlds, they create different kinds of entertainment projects that really harness new technology. And among other things, they have produced Less Than 3, which is a cutting-edge social media-infused streaming experience that has been utilized by Ultra. So that's the panel. And my background is that I'm Peter Chadi. I'm the CEO of Monad Digital Media Ventures. What we do is we represent companies in the MCN space, the studio space, and digital media tech companies with business advisory services, with venture capital, and also with some legal services that back that up. I've been in the industry for 25 plus years. I frequently write about the MCN space. I've been an entrepreneur and built different companies in the online video space. So streaming media, I've been coming to this event for a number of years. So with that, the title of the panel is New Opportunities for Monetizing Premium Video. So let's start at a very high level, 60,000 foot level. What is premium video? And Frank, I'll throw that one out to you. How you would define that one? Yes.
I think premium video. There's a lot of talk around scarcity, right? And I don't think the video content that's out there, I don't think it's scarce. However, premium video is scarce, and what I mean by premium is high production values, brand safe, because unfortunately we live in a world where if you want ad dollars, you have to be brand safe, but also distribution on other places that are also brand safe. Right? I think that's whoa, I don't know if that was you or me. There's a big issue I think that we face today in the digital landscape world, and I think it's more of an advertising issue. They're worried about where their content's going to live, right? So if you're going to create content, you have to also make sure that that content is going to play in a brand safe environment. To me, that encompasses the overall premium universe.
Any other perspectives? Mike, how about you? Coming from the MCN side of things, and again, we'll define what that means, but your point of view on premium video.
Sure. So I agree with, I think, half your statement, which
I like it a little bit, mixing it up already.
Yeah. I mean, I think that sort of content quality certainly is a key component to thinking about premium. But at the same time, I also do believe that it comes down to a meritocracy of sort of popularity of video. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to brand safety as a component, it really varies depending on the brand that is sort of engaging with the content itself. So the way that we think about it is the right content for the right audience, at the end of the day, with the right sort of safe environment, is considered premium. If we think about sort of premium content, so let's just even like 5-10 years ago, and you think about the life of a piece of content, and when you start going down into production, you think of yourselves as, well, I'm not going to distribute it for free sort of right off the bat. I'm going to think about different windowing, direct to DVD, and then into potentially windowing into sort of like sort of different distributions like in theaters and what have you. But at the same time, now if you take a look at how content is being distributed today, sort of in the premium sense, it's actually across the board, right? Everything ranging from sort of segments that are ad supported, all the way up into sort of like windows that are in specific channels like iTunes and what have you, that's sold for a premium at the first release.
Do you believe that very short form, bite size content that's produced, so for MCNs as an example, or even going further down to microbits, Vine, and some of the really short form content, can that be premium content?
Absolutely. I think it comes down to how that content is presented and whether or not there is an audience that's waiting for it. Small pieces of content that is in extreme sports, things that have, if you think about like, if you guys have seen like the Mentos commercial, the Mentos and Diet Coke, I mean, really short forms of content, but really has huge amounts of sort of engagement, right? Very brand safe. And if you think about the advertisers that want to be associated with that, I mean, there's obviously key folks that matches up.
So there are some perspectives on that. Let's move on to getting into the ecosystem itself. Since we started talking about MCNs at the beginning, and because of that mega deal, the $500 to $950 million mega deal, which is the talk in the premium online video world, and there have been deal after deal since that time. Warner Brothers just recently invested $18 million in leading MCN, Machinima. ProSieben just made a major investment in Collective Digital Studios. That's another major MCN. Big Frame was a smaller MCN that was just recently acquired by DreamWorks. Awesomeness TV, which is a part of DreamWorks, and Awesomeness TV itself was acquired about a year ago. And then there are some other rumors that are happening that I'll touch upon. But first, Mike, I'm going to go back to you, and then I'll get off you a little bit and move on. But since you're an MCN, at least defined as an MCN, tell us just really briefly what an MCN is.
Sure. So MCN, as most folks see it, really is a portfolio of channels on YouTube, and it's managed by a sort of single entity. Some of them have sort of single verticals. Some of them are more like sort of what full screen is, which we really are there to empower the creators across sort of multiple spectrums of content. I think that sort of if you look at it purely from the 1.0 perspective, that's pretty much the definition. The way that we think about the business, though, is where MCNs and like what MCNs should be is really sort of representation of talent to elevate them to the next level, right? The ability to provide them with everything ranging from empowering them to create better content, empowering them to have sort of better insights of how to best hone their craft with their community, and also how to generate them more money.
So then let's get to the rumor and hit that right off. I'm going to put you on the spot one more time, and I promise I'll move on.
Thanks.
But the $500 million to $1 billion number is not alone with that deal. In the last couple of weeks, it's been widely reported that our friend over here is in a company that is on the receiving end of potentially multiple bids. That's been widely reported, so I'm just reporting what's been widely reported. So, Mike, $500 to $1 billion have been numbers that have been jumping around for your company as well. So, care to comment?
Sure. So, tech trades in a lot of ways. I mean, especially in the last few weeks, I've talked to a couple of folks about this. It feels a lot like the tabloids nowadays, right? There's inklings of truths, but there's definitely a lot of rumors and speculations as well. What I would say is that I think it's definitely it's a heated space. As you can tell with how many people are sort of looking at it. I mean, it really is, the MCN is in a lot of ways both a disruptor and also an accelerant to the video creation business online and how video is being consumed.
But you didn't answer the question directly.
What was the question?
The question is, so are those rumors true?
So, the rule of thumb is...
I have to ask.
Sure.
I have to ask.
Sure. Now, the best way to think about it is, all companies keep an eye out for opportunities, but, and we continue to sort of take every single opportunity very seriously.
Very well said. Very well said. All right, so then before we move on into other players in the ecosystem, just flagging another different deal, because I think it's important to understand that this is, right now, this topic that we're talking about is much more timely than it was when it was defined 6 months ago for this program. In the last 2 months, this is top of mind right now, premium online video for the OTT world. So, and these are players that are deeply embedded within it. And another major deal, which is many of you I'm sure are aware of it, but it's kind of a surprising one, is you have the granddaddy AT&T that just recently announced a $500 million venture to produce content with the Chernin Group. And the Chernin Group itself is an investor in multiple MCNs, and one of those is part of the deal, and that's Crunchyroll, which is an anime-focused MCN. So $500 million from AT&T to get into that space with the Chernin Group. And it's about content development, at least as we understand. So, Frank, you're probably pretty close to, well, you are close to that world. How do you justify that number?
I think it just makes sense. I mean, content distribution and content platforms are evolving, right? And you have, with the advent of smart TVs and Xbox and Roku and all these new different ways to consume content, you now have folks that traditionally have been blocked out of that traditional linear market that now have access to platforms with the same, and compete with the same eyeballs that are watching television. So when you take a look at the app space and the smart TVs and all these different platforms, it's a massive, massive opportunity. And I think we're starting to see the trend that the people that are consuming this content, it's growing and growing and growing every single month. We see the data behind it. It's millions upon millions upon millions every single month. There's going to be a come to Jesus event. And to be quite frankly, if you're not taking advantage of those platforms as a content creator now, you're going to wind up being left out in the cold. Could be close to 6 months from now, a year from now. I don't know when that tide's going to turn. But I think what you're seeing is it's a culmination of a couple different things. One, you can now have the ability to reach the same eyeballs that have been traditionally designed for linear TV. But you also have, further than that, you also have a new type of technology that's actually putting video across the spectrum in a single landscape. It's not just TV versus digital anymore. Video is video, regardless of the platform it's on. So if you're going to be successful with content, you have to make sure you're on every single platform that's distributing that content. And OTT is absolutely a necessity for any brand that's serious.
But are you surprised that a granddaddy like AT&T is getting involved in content development?
Not surprised at all. I think the beauty of these platforms is that it gives the ability for all these folks who have traditionally been on one side of the spectrum to enter into others. We've already seen folks experiment, like BMW has done things around creating branded entertainment. Brand entertainment distribution thing we've done pretty successfully with Nike and others, and that's going to be a better way of actually reaching their audiences and the messages they're trying to get. it does not shock me whatsoever that these folks want to get into content creation, further brand it, get their messages out there, and maybe a not so kind of focused, hey, buy my AT&T smartphone, right? It's more about getting their name attached to really cool, compelling content.
And AT&T, right, any moment now, or not, but most people think yes, AT&T is rumored now to be making a $50 billion bid to buy DirecTV. And so if that deal happens, then what happens to EchoStar, and on and on and on. So again, these machinations are continuing. So you mentioned brands. So Will, I'm going to bring you into things. You represent artists, and you've been in that world for quite some time. And working with brands and giving your perspective on how brands can be brought into this overall ecosystem to monetize or optimize brand awareness with premium online video.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, just to give a little bit of background, one of our main focuses is building live events properties that incorporate not just music, but also immersive technologies and any way that we can create new interactive experiences for fans in a live entertainment setting, whether that's a concert. And to bring in brands, they need a lot more than a banner on the wall or a gobo. They really see the event itself as sort of the pebble that you throw into a pond, and capturing as much content, and in particular, premium video content is in a lot of ways the ripple that happens around that thrown pebble. And the more that you can create narratives and tell the stories that sort of are the parallels that they find attractive within whatever property we're building in terms of live events, the more that we can tell that story through premium content, and in particular, finding compelling media partners, finding the right artists that resonate with that brand and the message they're trying to tell, and more than anything, reach the consumer that they think is the #1 priority through the events and then through the world of content we're creating around it. That's an absolutely key part in building strong partnerships with brands and keeping them happy so that they can continue to support these sorts of experiences.
Are they looking to you to try to figure that out, how to best, the brands come to you and they are essentially looking for a strategy from you to do the kinds of things that you're
absolutely. I mean, there's
about?
a couple different ways that you can look at it. We aren't an agency. We aren't, taking, the seed of an idea from a brand and building our concepts and our creative around that. We approach it much more from the perspective of how can we build a really strong package, and everything including the collaborators, the venue, potential media partners for that content. Who technologists we want to bring in, whether it's building a biometric element into those events. We want to deliver that package in a bow to the brand so that we find a partner that is perfect for it, as opposed to having sort of a strong idea or creative concept that we then have to bend around the message or the sort of the will of the brand from day one.
So it's kind of an overall ecosystem approach, looking at things holistically, and premium online video is a piece of that and can drive the success on offline, and then offline driving more success online.
Absolutely, and I'm leaving out a very important element, which is expanding the audience in real time during the event. Anything that we can do. You mentioned Less Than 3, which I think is a very exciting platform. This is a streaming window where you have social media in real time, so you can have a little chat window, all the most relevant content being pulled from Instagram in real time, trivia questions popping up on your screen without refreshing the page. It's a pretty incredible platform, and the more that you can extend the brand's messaging and getting more eyeballs in real time, whether that's a sponsor on top of a Coachella live stream on YouTube, or whether it is something a little bit more niche and focused. There are a lot of ways that you can create a world of content and create a ton of ROI for these brands that goes well beyond just the event or just that night.
So Miguel, let's talk about MTV a little bit, and your overall strategy when it comes to the OTT space, and whether it's live streaming or more VOD, and also just kind of the broad array, long form, short form. But why don't we start about live streaming and how that fits into your overall strategy and monetization goals at MTV?
Right. Well, we've found a lot of luck and success being able to eventize music events. So we'd go in and set up like a large week-long event following the VMAs, and we'll live stream these events, and these events will be sponsored. So, you know, of course we're able to leverage the linear aspect, but this is all premium video, online video content that is like exclusively for our .com. So by leveraging that facet, we're able to take content that originally wouldn't live on linear and find a home for it on web. And, you know, from that content, we're able to actually bank it for future use and then end up publishing it on the VOD platforms.
So the way you described it sounds somewhat akin to the way Will was looking at things more holistically. And
Right.
extending the event, is that fair to say? So you have an event, and rather than have a moment in time, it's before, during, and after?
Correct, yeah. So a piece of content, you know, has that longevity where, you know, you don't necessarily need to tune in at the time of the live stream, but, you know, we can actually take that and get more use out of it by publishing it onto our VOD platforms, or even we've seen some content that makes its way to linear.
And what do you do to make it so that the live stream of the event itself, during the event, is as compelling as possible? What are some of the things that MTV does to actually make the experience its own?
Well, we've been experimenting a lot with trying to get an audience POV. We feel that like an audience POV is important. Of course, you know, that's in conjunction with the performance itself. But trying to get an audience POV translates really well to the audience at home. So we've experimented in many different ways. I mean, of course, you know, GoPros are always a great thing, but we want to take it a step further, and we're exploring different ways to do that.
Do you see that as being a standalone business that has to pay for itself?
You know, I don't know if we can see it as being standalone right then. You know, not right now, because I feel like that space is still kind of like it's still nascent right now. You see a lot of companies who are trying to deliver a good POV experience. Google Glass is one of them, of course. But there's a lot of other companies that are doing like, you know, POV. But right now we see it kind of like just accommodating our live stream musical events.
So Mike, let's go back to you in the MCNs again. Why don't you describe your business model, and first describe that, and then I'll ask a couple follow-ups on.
Sure. So Fullscreen was created as a company a little over 3 years ago by our CEO, George Strompoulos. And part of the philosophy behind the way that the company is created was, we're first and foremost a technology company that's built to support creators. We have products in which we support creators in understanding how to generate revenue, how to better hone their craft, and how to collaborate with other like-minded individuals to be able to sort of grow their audience. Our background is, at the end of the day, we're a portfolio of creators that we manage. Everything ranging from similar to record labels in sort of managing their opportunities in sort of selling their merchandise products, music, I mean, what have you. But also at the end of the day, also helping them activate sort of help the talent activate with brands. So on an overall basis, that's kind of the business.
And so the primary revenue drivers for you are what?
Advertising, so partnership with Google, obviously, but also we have a meaningful sales and talent team that help the talent sort of get opportunities, tie in with brands, activations with traditional media, as well as sort of content creation.
So when you, some of the things that you read about MCNs and those who challenge MCNs whether they're able to stand alone, it's part of it is because the economics that have been reported is that they've had a hard time, so I'll clump it all together. They have had a hard time to monetize directly and be profitable. So at least many of the rumblings in the industry are that MCNs are rarely, if ever, standalone profitable. So I'll give you a softball. Can MCNs be profitable on their own?
Absolutely. So if you think about the traditional MCN, as I mentioned at the beginning, the 1.0 model, if you're just looking at yourself as an aggregator or ad network, it's a lot of work for very little dollars for everybody. But if you think about it from a talent activation and really think about it from a broad stroke perspective, I mean, the changes in the ecosystem nowadays, I mean, instead of sort of the traditional media of having to really sort of invest in talent, getting them sort of accumulate a portfolio of audience, and then driving that to scale so you can sort of generate more revenues. There is a bit more of a meritocracy that's happening with YouTube, with content creation at scale, with the fact that content creation gets cheaper and cheaper every single day. Part of what our ability is to sort of support, part of what we want to do is to be able to support these creators and to think about them from a 360 perspective. Think about them on merchandise. Think of them.
So that is very agency-like.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. But also, I mean, part of this is also to help them sort of hone their craft, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So investing in these talent, being able to give them sort of the ability to build better quality products so their clients, or rather their audiences, are able to engage with them even further.
Right. Understood. So, from getting back to the MCN world, this is full screen's a little bit different than others, and usually these companies are lumped together as if they're all the same, but they're actually very different. Some of these companies are more just purely content focused, really, with less of a technology platform. Some are horizontally not focused, but cover multiple niches, whereas many of the leading MCNs are targeted toward a specific niche. So some of the, and help me, I'm sure I'll miss some of the leading ones, but the ones that I recognize at least are, Full Screen, Machinima, which is very game focused, gamer focused, and that's another very significant leading MCN that's typically reported as being a likely acquisition target. There's Dance On is one where actually our company, our venture capital firm, is invested in, but they're focused on the dance vertical and build themselves as the MTV of dance, essentially, for Gen Y, Gen Z. There's one, Me Too Networks, which is Latino focused and really owns that space, or is the significant leader in that space. And then The Whistle's another one, which is very sports focused. Those are some of the ones that that I track pretty closely. But are there any others that if whoever wants to chime in, of some MCNs that should be on the radar screen, particularly because there's so much focus on this space right now?
I think that Awesomeness, for one, I mean, with their Big Frame acquisition, I mean, and sort of being backed by DreamWorks, I mean, that's an investment in sort of the younger audiences. I mean, I think they're definitely making their step in stride. I'm a fan of what they're doing. And there's a handful of others also that's just across sort of different spectrums, everything ranging from the fashion vertical all the way down to...
Yeah, Style Hall.
Yep.
Style Hall is a good one.
Yeah.
That's another one. The fashion vertical is a very significant vertical in the YouTube economy.
That's right. So I mean, there's definitely sort of different folks who are in different breadths. I mean, the guys at Tastemade have done a phenomenal job as well.
Yeah. Okay, so then Frank, AOL. So do you see AOL getting into more of the MCN-like shorter form content?
We do. So
Content.
we made an investment a couple of years ago around the new fronts, right? Actually putting significant funds behind creating new content. We had, I'd say, minimal expectations around that because, AOL's producing content, great. What's it going to be about? A bunch of women cooking, something in a kitchen with, some chef somewhere. But it was a massive success, right? So we actually wound up producing a few shows, one of which, Candidly Nicole, which just did crazy numbers that rival what people are viewing on cable networks today, being sold to television as we speak. In addition to that, when you look at the aggregate amount, we're looking at over 150 million views for AOL's originals last year. I mean, that is a massive number, right? And I think when you look at that aggregate...
And what kind of
total,
originals are those?
So they range from anywhere. So the benefit of AOL is we kind of have a number of different brands and a number of different verticals. And AOL On specifically, the video hub for AOL has 15 channels of content, right? That range from cooking to fashion to sports to you name it. So when we look to create these programs, what we don't want to do is kind of just be in one single silo, right? We want to get the best content that we can produce with the best talent across these multiple segments to hedge your bet, right? Different verticals have different economics, different verticals have different advertising strategies around them. So what we don't want to do is be pigeonholed into one single strategy or one single vertical, and that's what we're known for. We did the same again this year, right? Again, across a multitude of spectrums of different audiences, different verticals. And again, we've already in this early piece of it, we're not even a month out of New Fronts, we're already seeing that a couple of shows are completely sold out with other discussions ongoing. And to be quite honest with you, I don't see us going another few months without the entire slate being sold. So massive success for us. We want to continue to do that. I think the portal business had to change, right? And I think the easy way to do it was, from our perspective, was obviously third-party distribution, which is a big part of it, but also the creation of originals, which now puts you in a different level altogether, right? So now we can compete with the NBCs of the world and the ABCs of the world because we're on the smart televisions, the same ecosystem that they're on, right? We're in those same living rooms, that same ability to get to those audiences, but then you couple that with the web distribution amongst our third-party network, amongst our niche channels as they exist today, it's kind of a recipe for success, right? A lot of brands have a desire to have that kind of distribution and reach, and there's not a lot of folks that can actually do that. But we're able to do it, and we're able to do it well, so it's, I see us continuing down that path.
And how do you, when you look at the competitive landscape, who do you see, who does AOL see as their primary competitors in the premium online video space?
No one. No, just kidding.
That's a given.
I think you have to make a couple of distinctions, right? There's SVOD and there's AdVOD, right? Are we going to compete with Netflix and House of Cards? No. Come on.
Do you not anticipate yourselves getting into that kind of original programming?
Never say never. We announced a long-form show this year called Connected, so we are getting into long-form. However, I think the different platforms call for different rules, right? Same thing you'd see on NBC today versus a cable show, right? We're advertiser-based, we're advertiser-supported, so we need to cater to those audiences in a certain manner. That being said, we did scripted a few years ago. Wasn't really our forte, didn't really work as well as we'd hoped. We made the switch over to kind of reality and kind of authentic voices, a thinking man's reality, I guess you can call it, as opposed to Honey Boo Boo. No offense to any Honey Boo Boo fans. I watched it a couple times, it's all right.
Offense is okay.
Yeah, so, I think when, everything's going to evolve, right? I can't tell you today that we're adamant, absolutely not going to do a scripted show along those lines today. But I can tell you that I can't say that we wouldn't do it in the future, right? Who knows what the future will hold? I think as the space as a whole continues to evolve, I think you're going to see non-traditional players getting into that long-form scripted world.
Yeah, already
and
seeing
making
it.
a success out of it.
Already
Absolutely.
seeing it.
Yahoo announced a couple of shows, and
Xbox
too. Yep, exactly. So I think you're going to start seeing that evolve. I think for us right now, we've hit our success marker. We want to continue to see success in that, but everything will evolve. We'll see what happens in a couple of years.
So getting into that, just what you touched upon, which is you have parties that you would never expect just about a year ago, getting into the original programming space in a very, very big way. And we identified a couple of them, but that's continuing on. And it's this quest, this HBO-like quest to differentiate. Correct. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise you have much of the same content that presumably will be available everywhere. So Will, let's ask from a talent perspective, and those kind of forces that are happening right now, what does it mean to talent? In terms of the opportunities and...
Sure, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to, look, a company like mine exists because the distribution channels that weren't available to independent companies were created seemingly overnight. And we were able to have the same reach that the biggest companies and the competitors, the highest level of, in our case, the music industry had. And it's a very interesting time because there are so many different ways to get that content out, and you don't necessarily need a record label to do that. And I know music best, so I can sort of relate this parallel towards what I see happening in our business day to day,
which includes premium video.
Absolutely, and for us, it's really a question of taking that talent, creating the best content around that, and then figure out what the strategy is. For us, it isn't to drive up the highest amount of views so that we can get ad dollars on that content that we're creating. For us, it's much more about making sure that content has the right tone, has the right branding in it, and it is shared through the right channels. It's not necessarily the biggest channels, because for us, if we have success at YouTube, we're not seeing that as a big paycheck. We're seeing that as a metric we can take and leverage towards bigger opportunities. So for us, if we have to take sort of a different path and sacrifice our own views or our own sort of stats on YouTube so we can get a certain look at press, or or so we can associate with a certain brand and build a relationship. Those are the strategies that talent are having to make, the sort of decisions of where they're going to bring the content they create, that 10 years ago you would just say, how can we get this on MTV? How can we get this on the radio? There's about, an infinite amount of roads to get from here to the next step of your career and getting the exposure that you're looking for. And you have to be extremely deliberate about how you want to be perceived, what, like not taking on every opportunity, but taking on the right opportunities.
So let's get to a meme that started probably about 1.5 years ago now. Jason Calacanis. And it was something that was, it was a theme that, or a blog post, I guess, that was heard around the world. And it was, what he wrote about was that they were content producers of premium video content on YouTube, and YouTube's economics are well reported. And his company or his efforts were given a significant advance by YouTube when YouTube started to break into premium online video. And despite the fact that these were seven-figure advances. Seven-figure advances for exclusivity, that the name of his blog post was something like, "I ain't gonna work on YouTube's farm no more." And so the creative community, there's been much sturm and drang about the fact that the creative community cannot effectively monetize YouTube. So from a talent perspective, what's your perspective on that? Representing talent and...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is very, very difficult. I mean, a lot of talent creators don't even necessarily know the tools at their disposal in terms of doing the correct content ID and creating a back-end setup so that if their content does make a mark or does get exposure, that whatever revenue is generated is going to the right people, because for us, an official music video is one of many, many different ways that the music that we are representing and creating can be utilized across YouTube. And I think that it is, in a lot of ways, seems like the Wild West to some smaller content providers and content creators, because they just assume that if you aren't getting multi-million views, that it's not worth your time. But it is, but to some extent, the videos that are getting 500,000, 1 million, 2 million views on YouTube, they are going to approach it much more from the perspective of what's the most promotional value that we can get out of this.
So I'm going to get into a lightning round right now because we don't have much time and I want to make sure that we open it up. But some hot topics. Where's Apple in the midst of all this? So Frank, I'm going to let you touch that one.
Oh, gee, thanks.
Yep.
I think Apple's done a great job of facilitating the technology. I think they're, to be quite honest with you, they're one of the pioneers of disruption in digital content distribution. It seems to me like they're more focused on the technology around content as opposed to the actual content creation. And I think that's their sweet spot, right? I think this idea of people trying to kind of reinvent the wheel and get out of their comfort zones always sounds like a good idea. However, 9 times out of 10, they always wind up going back to their comfort zones because they don't necessarily understand the world they're playing in.
But not as much from a content creation, Miguel, I'll ask you this question too, but from just being a service provider. Because certainly that's something that Apple, that's its playbook when it comes to media.
Yep.
It uses its massive success taking over the world of music by selling its hardware, which is its business model, by having an integrated service. So there's been a lot of anticipation for an ITV that's coming out, that this beautiful marriage of So Miguel, why is Apple not in that game?
Well, I feel like Apple is actually, they've kind of fallen behind in regards to them not being able to establish a subscription service, music subscription service. That's one thing. I mean, also in the TV landscape, they are also falling behind to smaller rivals like Google. Chromecast has been something that's kind of innovated that space. I think they're waiting for the right time or broker the right content deals before they can come out there and introduce another piece of technology. I think they're kind of sick of sitting aside and letting the content creators reaping the benefits. So I think that's the way to go.
So there's, of course, I'm sure, again, 90% of you know this, that Apple right now is heavily rumored to be looking to acquire Beats for $3.2 billion. and whether there's going to be something even greater than that to get Apple into the television world or the premium online video world, that certainly wouldn't surprise me. There's quite a cash hoard that they have. So really quickly, what trends, I'll ask it this way. Give me a company in the ecosystem, in the premium online ecosystem, that you believe is doing things in a very innovative way and maybe under the radar. It can be any company in this ecosystem. And I'll start with Mike.
Believe it or not, I would actually go back to Apple. If you think about what Apple has actually done, right, with iTunes, what they've initially done is created a marketplace where they have an end-to-end control over the platform and the audience. If you look at sort of how they've turned iTunes itself actually into a place where indie labels and artists are able to now sort of sell their music directly. If you take a look at like one of our talents, Grace Helbig and Camp Dakota, I mean, they were able to window their first launch not on any sort of indie network and what have you, but really launch it on iTunes and generate sort of meaningful amounts of revenue on an ongoing basis with their audience if they've built on YouTube.
Okay, so I'm going to have to move on to Miguel. Sure. So it's just really quick, give me a company that you believe that we should watch, or a service that we should watch in the...
A service or a company?
If one doesn't come to mind, Frank.
I actually saw a really cool company. It's a startup, a company called Vidable. They actually do some really cool things. It's technology amassed with distribution that provides premium content distribution for maybe folks who never thought they could actually get distribution and exposure to massive companies. It's actually a really cool little company. They have a really cool little piece of technology, but also they were smart around the content distribution strategies as well.
Cool. I'll check them out. Will?
There's a company called VHX that's based in Brooklyn, a startup. They do direct-to-consumer, long-form video sales. The new Kevin Spacey documentary about, he was in a Shakespeare play. They have that, it's not a consumer-facing platform. It's just a beautiful back-end and a very streamlined, very smart way to deliver this high-premium content for people with built-in audiences, such as Aziz Ansari, different documentaries. They're a small but growing company that is definitely worth keeping an eye on.
One last question, and then I will open it up. FCC, I can't leave the podium without asking about that, because net neutrality proposal is coming out any day now, and is that what we've all understood, which is this purported compromise where there'll be no roadblocks to traffic blockers, but there will be potentially some premium service that can be paid for, essentially. That's the way I understand it. So with the proposal that the FCC has laid out, or is anticipated to lay out, is that, Mike, is that a thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'm a believer in net neutrality, but I think that if there are folks who are willing to pay for direct connectivity, like a direct relationship, and it's between two companies, I think it's fine.
Frank?
I would agree.
Okay. Will?
I'm very conflicted. I feel that anything that has the potential to restrict the flow of communication on the internet is dangerous.
How about and also just in terms of the potential impact on startups or smaller companies that can't open up their pockets?
Yeah, one of the most primary things fundamental things that makes the net such a wonderful thing is the fact that it really is just an insane democratization across, especially with media. So I got to disagree with these guys.
Okay, so thumbs up.
Thumbs down.
Miguel?
Thumbs down. I think anything that will hinder like a startup company from being able to distribute content to the masses is a bad thing.
Okay, so the two guys here are the thumbs up, and I don't know how many. Let's show of hands. The new proposal from the FCC, is that a good thing or a bad thing for the premium online video industry? Thumbs up? How many people raise your hands if you think it's a positive thing? Raise your hands if it's a negative. Wow. Okay, so you know who to get. All right, we only have a couple minutes, so questions from the audience for the panel. Yes, sir. Can you say who you are and also approach the microphone if you don't mind, so they can.
I'll yell loudly. Full screen. Do you find the content creators, or do they find you? And do you charge them? Do you pay for their services? Are there advances? What's the deal?
So we do both. So there are talent that we go and actively pursue that we think has potential to continue to grow. And there are lots of folks that come through us and apply through our service. Of the 1,000 that apply, we only take a small percentage. And to answer your question, what we do is it's a collaborative process. So for some talent that we do actually pay sort of upfronts and guarantees. For some, what we actually do a rev share. So the better that we help them generate revenue, the more that we collect in the back end.
Do you see this as a scenario that the big studios would eventually morph into so as to not leave it on the table?
I think the meritocracy of sort of how content creation is happening now is giving folks the ability to not only showcase their talent, but also bring an audience along with it. This is a much more sort of data-driven approach. And I think that studios are definitely seeing that as a real opportunity for them to, instead of sort of making bets on hits and being hit makers, having a better chance and probability of success.
And bringing those into even upstream into more traditional content packages. So starting with the very small screen, small packages, identifying, like you said, some interesting talent, and then bringing them perhaps in television or merchandising or motion pictures.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm curious, are there bidding wars the way there are with record labels after hot acts like with MCNs, or is the talent so embryonic that it's just going to work or it doesn't?
It's the same.
Same
it's
thing?
Lots of bidding wars, lots of discussions, contracts, and heavy negotiations.
Other questions from the audience? All right, hearing none. Thank you, everybody on the panel. I think it's a great group, and hopefully we covered some of the bases that you wanted to hear. But thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.